So I'll briefly cover some of the things that I either have done or heard other people been successful at doing about self-planning. I did about an hour discussion and presentation about a year ago on another one of these webinars or Zoom sessions, and it's recorded on our YouTube channel about how to use eBird Explore option, which I was just doing to answer that question. That basically anywhere in the world you can tell where birds have been because people record their being there. So I won't reiterate that, but that in my mind is the most helpful thing for figuring out where to go, where the hot spots are anywhere in the world. Before that, there were things like contacting local Audubon, finding contacts for that, and then you go to Facebook. There's Facebook groups and finding people that are in there and asking for help informally from friends. Of course, you're traveling out of town, you got to find hotels and lodges and that sort of stuff. So TripAdvisor is always helpful for those. And then another one that some people have used is this Birdingpal.org. It's an informal way of saying, hey, I'm coming to your area of the country. I think it's mainly in the US. Not exactly sure, I've not used it myself. And people can volunteer to say, hey, I'm available for an hour or so. Can I take you somewhere or meet you somewhere? So those are some things that are helpful for self-planning. And then there's local guidebooks, like the Pasadena Audubon is publishing a new one. There's hotspots all over the Southwest in particular, and across the South in the East in Florida, Texas, etc. Publish specialty books. Some of them do it online, but most of them are a little booklet sort of fashion. Ours here locally was done by a student at the University of Illinois named Colin Dobson, and then a person I have not met, Joseph Steenma, is a guide to finding birds along the Illinois River. So I recommend getting a copy of that book for figuring out where to go. And it runs from a little bit north of Peoria till down in the St. Louis area. So it's a good guidebook for showing you his routes that he finds helpful in that area. Then again, there are Audubon chapters that have outings for Peoria Audubon. We post that on our website and in the events area. We had one yesterday jointly with the Peoria Park District with a woodcock walk out at Tawny Oaks. Another local Peoria Audubon Society, another local Audubon Society in the central Illinois is the John Wesley Powell. And I put their website up there too, so you can, or actually you can just Google them to find their events as well. And then in Illinois, the Illinois Ornithological Society also does a series of events that are open to the public, and you sign up on their website. So those are all things that you can do in Illinois for finding places and events that you can join other people, and for the things that are done by like the Audubon chapter or iOS, those are led by people that know what they're doing, know the area, and can answer questions. So those are always good. Then venturing a little further afield, something that we tried for the first time in 2019, I believe, was something called a birding festival. We'd never really heard of birding festivals all that much, but Mary, my wife, started following some artists and birders, and they basically said, hey, we're going to be at the festival down in wherever, there's some in Texas, they're scattered across mainly the southwest, and then up into Michigan and other places where people find that there are a lot of birds that would draw an interesting crowd. And then they have a series of workshops and seminars and field trips all over the course of a few days. So I put the website in there for the festivals in 2022, and they show maps and dates and sample itineraries, that sort of thing. And I'll talk a little bit more about that a little later on tonight. Something we're trying for the first time is a camp. And we're going to an Audubon camp this summer, God willing, and COVID agrees and doesn't get it canceled again. We're planning on going in 2020, but that didn't happen. And so I put a little link in there to the Audubon Society Hog Island, They have a series of camps for anywhere from teenagers to people just getting into birding. We're going to the artists, basically nature journaling and photography session. So again, those are week-long camps, and they do also entertain and have day-long tours too. So that may be something you might want to click on that site and go take a look at. So I'll pause there and say, anybody got any questions about those things that are not necessarily related to the main topic, which is where does it make sense to go with a guide, but our planned events are ways that you can help yourself. So I want to pause a little bit. If anybody's got a question, just unmute yourself.
It looks like it's good to go.
So one thing that it boggled my mind as to how exciting and how helpful and how enjoyable it was going to a lodge that specializes in ecology sorts of things. So they're the ones that we've been to have been oriented around birding. There may be others. One of them in Costa Rica had a very nice orchid garden, and there may be other interesting areas. But sites like that picture of the hummingbird feeder is a tray of sugar water with hummingbirds lining it. It was just, that's sitting on a balcony, and you can walk up, several feet away. It just is mind blowing to do that. And they're usually associated with them, have trails in the area. And they also have some organization that ahead of time you can contract with them to hire guides. They've vetted the guides, they know who the good people are, and you could have day trips. So the evenings and mornings usually are spent at the lodge, where you're served great food, local cuisine, and then during the day you're out on a day outing with a guide that's familiar with a specific area for that day. So that's a very good way of doing it. And again, in the days of before the internet, I don't know how people did this, but now you can just basically Google the country you're interested in and say birding lodge, and you'll get a lot of hits, and you can browse to your heart's content to find ratings and that sort of thing about them. So Mary, did you have anything you wanted to add on that in particular? I'll ask my wife if she wants to say anything about that one or not.
Not really, but we've had some very good experiences with birding lodges.
And as far, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, Ecuador, Costa Rica, Belize. Yeah.
So accommodations are I would say rustic but nice and clean, well kept. Some of them have generator power where you have power during the day but not at night. Meals have just been out of this world excellent, because it's usually locally grown, locally sourced, and prepared very well. And they depend on ecotourism, so they want people to come back. They want to have good reports, and so they go out of their way to be nice and helpful. And the guides that they hire to come help either tour their local trails or take you somewhere have always been excellent that we've experienced. So that's a picture of one in Ecuador there, from the parking lot up to the main entrance of the lodge. Anybody have any questions that they have about that? Okay.
I'm Patricia Malake, and I would just ask, are these accessible for all ages? Or, if you're over 70, I mean, is this going to be an arduous kind of situation for you?
Yeah, we'll get into that when I talk about tours. I mean, when I looked at lodges, there's usually each one will kind of provide some helpful information to help you make that choice. Okay. They know that their demographics mostly are people that have the time and the money to travel. So they try to be as open and accessible as possible. But like on this picture here, you see there are stairs. So right. that is the limiting factor in some lodges. So they usually try to describe those sorts of things fairly well so that you can make an informed choice.
Thank you.
I'll get into a specific tour that we went on and some of the demographics of who came on that. So in a little bit
I appreciate that. Thank you.
more detail. Some other types of types of guides that talk about. One is your area specialists. So for Illinois, I would highly recommend to Colin Dobson if he has the time. He's a student at the University of Illinois, very pleasant to be around. And then for our area in particular, Central Illinois, Southern Illinois, he's very good. And there's his website. Again, he's a full-time student at the University of Illinois, so his time slots are limited, but he occasionally will host a pelagic on one of the Southern Illinois lakes where he'll take a pontoon boat out and guide for an afternoon on that. So look at Colin's site, recommend him highly. And then areas like Southern California, there's a person named Luke Tillers, highly regarded. I have not gone particularly with him, but very, very well known across the world. He guides, but he lives in Southern California, and that's kind of where he's based out of. So there's his website. And again, you can look at the other links for someone that we have been on a tour with Mario. He does Central America and Ecuador is where we went on a tour with him. And then Kristen Mena, he actually came to Peoria and we got to spend some time. We got to take him around a little bit, but he focuses on part of Costa Rica where he's a guide at a natural area called Monteverde. The other one are sometimes you get to following certain people that are photographers or notable artists, and they will organize a tour. And it's organized, they'll usually work with a tour company, and they will be one of the hosts / guides. They typically will bring along another guide. And so that's also something that a way of getting into it by knowing somebody. And in our case, it was Julie Zickfuss out of Ohio, is an author, speaker, and nature, mostly bird artist. And Mary got to know her a little bit through that. And then she had an outing to Ecuador. And then we weren't planning on going until she had 2 people drop out a month or 2, or excuse me, 2 months ahead of time and said, anybody open? And we made a rush decision. And that's the one where, Mary, what would you say the demographics were? We were one of the younger ones there. Mary and I were in our late 50s at the time, and we were one of the younger ones on the tour. Mary, you want to chime in there?
I'm trying to think how many people on that tour would have been younger than we, and not many. Yeah, a couple of the guides would have been younger than us, but there were people that were late 70s at least.
And so this one, each tour, this one they rated as, they would rate the physical activity level as moderate. And they basically ahead of time said there will be hikes that are mainly across level ground, most of them for a mile or so. And there are a few that basically, there was only one hike to one particular bird that probably one person should not have gone on. It was overtaxing for them. So I don't think they made it to the inside. One of the guides stayed with them and made sure they got back to the bus safely, and they waited on the bus. So that was the only, again, they typically for organized tours, that's one of the items is that show you activity level, and we'll rate it from we're setting at feeders to extraneous. So they'll give a good guidelines ahead of time for that. And then there are tour companies that have websites that you can go out there and browse around that show the different tours to various parts of the world. And some of them, like Red Hill Birding, that's based out of Chicago. Josh and Adam, founders and our local guides, they're active in the Illinois Ornithological Society. So you'll see their booth at iOS meetings. So you can actually go to some meetings in Illinois and talk to the people that you would be going to have a tour with. And they're the ones that arrange the all of the lodges, the transportation, local guides, etc. And there are a variety of other things. So like Holbrook Travels, who we went with to Ecuador, there's lodges I've mentioned before have their own scheduling of tours. And then there's something that we've not gone on, but I think Pete Finner, Pete, I don't know if you're on, can talk a little bit about Rhodes Scholar, which has nothing to do with a college and no, nothing to do with colleges in England, but it's hitting the road in a scholarly fashion. They have nature tours, and you may learn something about the culture as well. So I'll pause for a moment. If anybody's been on a Rhodes Scholar tour, you can chime in and give us a little experience. Anybody been on a Rhodes Scholar tour?
Yeah, this is Pete. I've been on 3 of them, and they're all professionally organized. They hire English-speaking guides that usually are bilingual. Been to Ecuador and been to Costa Rica twice. They're reasonable. They can, if there are people that want to bird all day, you can do that, but then you don't have to. You can, sit by the pool, one day while others go birding. So it's a little bit more low key maybe than some guides that may want to just, start birding at 4 a.m. and go until midnight. You might be able to do that if you want, but generally it's kind of a calmer, but still very professionally done. And yeah, I highly recommend it. Prices are reasonable too. Yeah, I've had just really good experience with them.
Thank you, Pete. And then another one that comes up quite often at birding festivals that always have a booth there, or at least the ones we've been to, is Wildside Nature Tours. Again, we have not gone on those from that tour company, but we know some of the guides that are there for the nature journaling or birding, and have heard good reports on them. So I put that out there as something we've heard good of, even though we don't have personal experience with that. And Pete, thank you for the good lead in to that. And this is all these tours and maybe even some lodges have focus areas, or they'll have a birding week, or the lodges might have a photography focus or an art nature journaling. But in particular, tours will tell you their focus. In addition to the activity level, they'll say this tour is focused on birding, for example. And so your goal, like Pete was saying, if you're going on a birding tour specifically, you should expect getting up before dawn, eating breakfast by dawn, and out where you're going to be at dawn, and not coming back in until it's dark. And your goal after dark is sitting down around a table and having a good time, checking off the checklist of who saw everything, to make sure that everybody has their checklist reviewed so that you saw what we saw during the day. And that is the focus. Sure, you can stop for a picture or two, but don't slow the group down. It will leave you behind if you're taking pictures at one bird. It's crossed off the list. Everybody see it? Yes, crossed off. Let's keep going. That's a birding focused area. Then there are photography tours, and that's a little bit more leisurely. I won't say leisurely. It's different. You're given a packing list of what to bring along. You sometimes they're sitting around in a blind around bird feeders with multiple flash units set up for you, and you have your time slot in there. You're taking pictures of other animals. You're taking pictures of scenery. Your bird list is less than going on a birding tour, but you're interested in more of the other things. The beauty of the surroundings are the focus area, with the objective of taking beautiful pictures. Even slower paced thing is the art and nature journaling workshops. I have never been on one of those, so we're going to again experience our first camp where we're going out to an island. And there will be sessions probably where the people doing it for several hours will not move. And they'll be drawing things that go by. The focus is on capturing thoughts and asking questions and drawing and learning how to journal and making things not only look beautiful in a journal that's done via watercolor and calligraphy and other things. So I put a link there to the person that I think is one of the best nature journalists and definitely the best artist I know, from Catherine Hamilton. So if you want to know more about those sorts of things, there's an example of that website. And then there are other tours that maybe has a little birding, maybe has some photography, but maybe it is more oriented to, we're also going to experience the culture. We'll stop in some cities, visit churches. We're going to go shopping. We'll go, in our case, even though it was a birding, nature journaling photography, when we went to in Ecuador, mainly birding, we stopped off for a day and went to a hat factory. How do they make these Panama hats? So that was, you may have a smattering of those in the other areas too. But if you're there for, if you're expecting a birding thing, then somebody surprises you, or you're surprised to see a half day of shopping on the agenda. That's something, again, a good tour company will put out the agenda ahead of time so that you go in and see if that's a good fit for you, and they'll break out how much time will be spent in any of these areas. So anybody have any questions about those types of things that are typical focus areas for either lodges or tours? Any comments? Pete, did anything on the Rhodes Scholar focus on anything more than the birding aspects?
Yeah, there are, of course, the ones I went on were exclusively birding focused. That doesn't mean, like I said, you could stay behind and take photographs, of, some where these lodges are. They're just usually very beautiful areas. You could probably spend an entire day photographing things on the lodge grounds.
Great.
But the ones I went on were all birding focused, but Rhodes Scholar has, I don't want to make this commercial for Rhodes Scholar, but they have all kinds of other tours that you can take that focus on photography, history, culture, biking, et cetera, et cetera. So Rhodes Scholar is a huge, has a huge offering of tours, but the ones I went on were specifically birding focused, so that's what we could do. Yeah.
So I kind of did a little bit of a graphic here that says, when is it probably better for you to go it alone versus when is it better to ask for help? So I'll put in some categories. Language. If you are fluent in the language, great. That says you can go alone. If you can't even read the letters on the signs, that's an indication you need some help. And there's a whole gamut in between. Location. If you've been there, you traveled there as a kid and you have a family vacation home in the area, great. Go it alone. If it's far away, across the world, first time there, maybe it's time to get some help there. If you're going somewhere and you have target birds that's like, oh, I just want to be in the environment and whatever I get, that's great. That's fine. But if you have a specific list and they're hard to find or are only in certain spots, it might be time to ask for some help. If on the time side, you're driving yourself, you have all the time in the world and you can go wherever you want, whenever you want, great, go alone. And I mean alone by, whoever you want to take along with you, of course. But if you're flying to a specific country and you're going to go there for a business meeting or something, and you've got a day to do something, and you have some things you want to see, might be time to hire a local guide for that sort of things, because you can't change the date and you don't know the area. So, and your time constraint and money. Sometimes it may be cheaper if you're traveling out of the area to go with a tour company than do it yourself. And I categorize that as, if you have an itinerary that has the same quality of lodging, the same quality of food, somebody driving you around, and a guide to show you where it is. If you're going to do all the things that a tour company would do for you, it's probably less expensive to have the tour company do it for you than to have you do it yourself, especially if your time is worth anything to you, and you won't kick yourself in the rear for having missed something, because they've been there, done that, and have years and years of experience. So money, don't necessarily think that a tour is more expensive than doing it yourself. Then there's risk. I mean, if you're on your own, you're responsible for yourself. If you're on a tour, you have the expertise and knowledge that they advise on things like what shots should you get, and where should you go or not go in a country or a city. But things aren't under your control. You go where the bus goes. So again, if you're a control oriented person, maybe that leans more towards the doing it yourself, or hiring a guide and negotiating where to go. If you are learning how to bird, or learning how to photograph, or learning how to do a nature journalist, and you aren't the expert in those areas, and you want assistance or an instructor, maybe you hire somebody to do that. But if you're an expert, go for it yourself. And then there's just the people aspect. If you're a loner, or want to be just with the people you know and don't really want to talk to anybody else, that's more towards the side of not going on a tour. But if you like to be around others, that means it's kind of more trends towards the other end of the spectrum. So anybody have any questions about that? That's kind of just some general things that I talk about for considerations.
I have a comment,
Yeah.
Steve, on that, and I would add driving. That if you're comfortable getting around that country, or I mean, sometimes you drive on the left-hand side of the road or whatever, but if you want to go see a variety of different places, renting a car and driving yourself in a foreign country can be a real challenge.
Yeah, and I would say that for Ecuador, I would not have survived. I would have killed myself.
Yeah, me too.
There are rules like a 2-lane road is really a 3-lane road in some countries, where people kind of have the unwritten rules of the road that a car is coming at you, and that's okay to pull out, because everybody knows that the car you're passing should pull over half a lane, and the car that you're meeting should pull over half a lane, so you drive down the middle. Those are unwritten rules of the road that your bus driver knows and that you don't. And it's scary. Here's a quote from a book that I was reading. It has nothing to do with birding, but it was from a guy that was scouting an area for a kayak tour company. And let me just read this. He was they were trying to find a location for where to go the first night after people step out of the plane in the country, and then what would this place that they had found that they thought was wonderful, would it fit? Chickens and ducks were everywhere. The eggs were suspiciously leathery. The accommodations were cool, like they were huts, but they weren't really good for people fresh off the plane. When you arrive in a foreign country, the strangeness, the foreignness of it, you have to give people a comfortable place to settle in. So again, most of these tours that we're talking about have people that will meet you at the airport and take you somewhere for the first night, because everybody's kind of gathering, and you do some orientation, that they try to make that sort of at least initial view of the new world, give you some orientation. For us in Ecuador, they put it up at a very, very nice hotel that was in a town that had an international airport, and that was the same hotel that we used to disembark from when we left. So you had the same beginning and ending. And again, that's something that tour companies will do, is provide a way that even though they may be traveling out and staying in lodges in the middle of nowhere, they usually have a beginning and an ending spot that will help the traveler get accustomed make it easy to get in the country through customs and all that sort of stuff, and then some orientation before you go out. And then some other criteria. Again, when a tour company does things, they give advice on international travel, picking up and dropping off at the airports, all arranged. There may be park tour passes that are needed. They take care of all of that. There's multiple locations. They handle transportation between them. All of the there could be private areas that they've negotiated with the landowners for access to that you may not be able to get into otherwise. And they know where to go and where not to go. Some of the things to watch for and part of your selection criteria would be, do they give any refunds if you get sick and can't go? You know, how far ahead of time can you cancel, and what do you forfeit when you do? And how early do you have to make a reservation before things fill up? So those are some things to consider about logistics. I think we've already talked about intensity, costs a little bit. One of the things we haven't talked about is that some tours, in addition to the primary focus of birding photography or journaling or whatever, provide opportunities to help the local people. They may ask you to bring along an extra duffel bag full of clothes, or to leave an extra pair of shoes with them, and they will disperse them to the local area. Mary, I think you had an example of that. I can't remember who that was. So if you want to comment on that a little bit.
I'm not sure which one you're
The World Girl birding person. I can't remember who it was. Oh, birding by bus, maybe.
Oh, birding by bus. Yeah, I think they did some kind of community. I can't even help you right now, but basically they did some kind of, gifts to local people or local organizations while they were there.
Okay.
Can't think right now. Sorry.
Alrighty. And there's always opportunities to tip the local guides, because sometimes you travel around with your main guide, you stop at a park, a national park, and another person gets on the bus that's their specialty, is that park. And then they're your guide for the day there, and there's opportunities to tip that local, invest in the local economy, and promote ecotourism that way too. So
one of the persons on the Zoom said that we went to Columbia and they asked us to bring school supplies to help distribute to the locals.
great example. Thank you. And the other thing that a lot of these tour companies and the local lodges have going for them is good government relations. So like when we were in, I can't remember if it was Costa Rica, it was Belize, I believe, that there were security checkpoints, and they knew the guards, that sort of stuff. So you never had any problems with, where are these 15 people in this bus going to, and what are your purposes? They've seen them before. It's like, oh yeah, hey, how you doing? Oh, that sort of thing. And so it went fairly smoothly. So here we're getting into a specific example of a tour of what is provided ahead of time, some of the planning sorts of things. These are extracts from a guide that they mail out. The price provided via PDF as well. So they provide emergency contact numbers, the phone numbers of the places you're going to be staying. And if you look over at the table of contents, there's what to bring along for travel information, a map and itinerary, give you if it's a foreign language, non-English, they provide some sample phrases that may be helpful to know for like ordering at a restaurant. Where's the restroom? I'm lost, that sort of stuff. Things other than birds, a checklist for those things, a place for notes, and that sort of thing. So again, they provide a very good planning information for you to have a successful trip. How to make international calls, for example, how to get your cell phone to work in a foreign country. So here's an example of a suggested packing list. I won't go through the list details, but again, they provide you very detailed information based on where you're going, what to bring along. And then a small map about that shows kind of where you'll be going. And then a day-by-day itinerary. In our case, we were going primarily for birding. So, this date, we are going to this place. We're going to eat lunch here. We're going to eat dinner there. And here are the birds that we will be targeted for that day and we'll likely see. So ahead of time, you can look in your bird book for that country or whatever you're going and learn what those look like and, make some notations. So anybody have any questions about itineraries and planning information that might be on these things? Great. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit. And remember, I talked earlier about festivals. And so this one was the last one we were able to, this is pre-COVID, the last pre-COVID thing we went to was called the Festival of the Cranes. And it was in, I can't remember the name of the town or near the town. It wasn't really in a town, but it was in, help me out, Mary. What state? New Mexico?
In New Mexico, south of
Yes.
Albuquerque,
Yeah, okay.
at Bosque del Apache.
Bosque del Apache. And for those, the planning isn't a set agenda, but here is Friday's things that you can do. So for each time slot, there may be 5 different things, 10 different things, and you pick from there, and it's basically a la carte. Each of the sessions has a price to it. So you can spend a little bit or a lot on the festival, depending on where you want to spend your time doing. And each of them will have either an instructor in a classroom setting or a field sort of setting. And if it's traveling to a nearby nature area, we'll also provide transportation. If you have to pack a lunch for the day, they will provide packed lunches and guides for that. So it's priced accordingly. So as you can see on this one, there's just a wide variety of things, and they have codes of letters that tell you what type of event it is, and then what days it's offered on, and the prices, and where it's going to be, and where you're going to meet, and that sort of thing. So here's an example again of the festival grounds. Everybody meets in one place. There's parking. This happened to be at a nature center at Bosque del Apache. And then they have a tent set up where basically different vendors were there. If you're a photographer, this was an excellent event because Canon was there, and they brought along every currently available Canon camera and lens that a wildlife photographer might possibly be interested in. And you could rent them for the day for free. So every day I had a different camera and was trying it out. And you could, you have to sign a waiver that says if you break it, you bought it. But if you're willing to haul around, you could set yourself up a $20,000 rig for the day at zero cost, provided your driver's license. It was quite interesting. And then as well as tour companies are there, Zeiss had a set there. And then there was a camera retailer, like I forget who it was, Bedford's or Hunt's, I guess it was. And they had everything from A to Z that you could just buy, miscellaneous stuff while you're there. So, and then they also would have some place for the classes and that sort of thing as well. And then, like I said, oops, I went ahead too far. Now on the right side there, you see the little area. I don't know if you can see my mouse or not. This was the enlarged area of this, where you're parking, and the actual expo organization happens here. But it was associated with the wildlife refuge that has its own driving area where you could drive around on your own. And then some of the tours were right there locally as well. Does anybody have any questions about festivals?
Yeah, Steve, on the Festival of the Cranes, Bosque del Apache, was there a fee for the, just to attend this, or could you just sort of walk up
Yeah, there was some initial fee. I can't remember what it was for just the festival. They kind of to pay an overhead for organization. I think they provided a few meals, that you could eat there. Mary, I don't remember. Do you remember kind of roughly what that was? I can't remember.
I don't remember how much it was, and I know I've looked at other festivals that we have not attended, and it seems like they're all done differently. Some of them you just pay a flat fee and you go to whatever you can manage to sign up for. Like the most popular workshops and tours and stuff tend to fill up really fast. So, you know, if you're going to go to a festival, why sign up early and figure out what you want to do early so you don't miss out. But yeah, and I see Dave Paddock's question here. Usually for these festivals, I mean, you have to find a place to stay. Some of them, they have like a host hotel where, you know, most of the people are staying in one hotel. This one, you kind of had to find a hotel or an Airbnb or something.
Yeah.
There wasn't any lodging on site.
Yeah, this one we stayed at an Airbnb. I think in the planning guide ahead of time, they provided a list of local sorts of restaurants and hotels that you could check into. We went to one in Michigan that the event was actually held in a hotel in the hotel conference room area, and you could get rooms at the hotel. And then of course there all the events were, all the field trips were, you had to go somewhere to go to them. And there isn't necessarily only birding. So if you look back at this, this very large array, I mean, there was a radio telescope area that was nearby that they provided a tour there. They had a nighttime reception at an astronomy club at a local college that was there. That was kind of neat to go to. That was, again, a variety of things on the agenda of things that you could do. Good questions, good comments, thank you. And then I just haven't had a closing slide that said the good, the bad, the ugly, the funny. Kind of open it up for some experiences. I'll put in there some ways of some things I felt would be helpful for making things as good as possible. Maybe to look at yourself to say, am I a good fit for these sorts of things? So, can I put up with other people is the main thing. You know, there are on tours or lodges, there are other people around. I mean, there's you, there's the guides, there's others. It's always helpful to be patient and helpful and courteous and considerate. One of my pet peeves is people talking very loudly when there are birds close by and you have never seen them in your life, and somebody is tapping on your shoulder and wanting to talk about the cards game or something like that. It's like, shut up. So again, you have to look inside yourself saying, would I fit in well with the group that I'm with? Am I going on a birding trip or I'm a photographer trip? Can I talk the lingo and kind of go with those things that you can get along with those sorts of things? Having a sense of humor is good. Being out of your comfort zone and being comfortable with that is good. Another one of my pet peeves was people, if it's the same person holding up everybody waiting, the bus is ready to leave for the birding spot you're supposed to get to before dawn, and somebody isn't down for breakfast. You got to know that if you're that person, somebody will be knocking on your door and saying, you have 10 minutes to be out here, or I hope you enjoy your day at the lodge. Those sorts of things are set your expectations for yourself. And the nice thing about it is you aren't the enforcer. That's the guides and the tour operators do that sort of policing for you. And for me, I'm a control freak. I have to tell myself that's not my job. I am here to enjoy this and make it enjoyable for others as much as I can. And other people's job is to enforce the rules and make sure everybody gets on the bus and all that sort of stuff. On the festival workshops, I've had bad workshops where, let's say the main instructor that I was there to see this workshop has something come up where they're ill or family issues where they don't make it, and they have a pinch hitter doing the best that they can. Sometimes you basically have to ask when you get there, hey, is everybody, whether we're scheduled I'm going to be, you show up at the registration desk and say, are all the speakers that I signed up for going to be here? And if they're not, you have to debate on whether you want to, cancel out of that session or not. So that's something to watch out for. One of my things I would suggest is that if you need to be the center of attention and talking to a guide all the time to cater to your needs, hire a local guide, hire a private guide on your own. Don't go on a tour, because other people will. I mean, you're taking time away. It's a shared resource, and so tour. One of the things to look at a tour is what's the guide to participant ratio. So the bigger the ratio, a 10-to-1 is a big number. Then the less attention you get, but probably the less expensive the tour is. A 3-to-1 ratio, like for photography, you're almost getting one-on-one instruction a lot of the time. So that's one of the criteria. And again, select your. And again, if you need 1-to-1, just hire a guide or schedule through a lodge and say I need a private guide for that day. So the lodge handles the scheduling, the meals and that sort of stuff, and hires the guide for you. Then we talked about look at the schedule, look at the activities, see if it's compatible with your abilities. And Pete mentioned if not, there may be certain activities where you're staying in a lodge, or if you're between lodges in a bus, you're staying with the bus driver in the bus. If somebody's hiking up Mount Fuji or whatever it is, and that day, and you aren't up for that. So again, they usually provide very good information ahead of time so you can make informed choices. Food is one area that I think you need to be flexible on. I have eaten wonderful food in most of the experiences that we've done out of country or even in the US. But there are what I call bologna experiences, where one meal on an outing, they open up the box lunches and there's a bologna sandwich, and half, I won't say half, some of the people in the tour group refused to eat it. They went hungry. That's not going to be me. I'm going to eat whatever they put in front of me and be happy for it. So I don't know, Mary, if you want to share any more about the bologna experience. It's the humorous, that's the funny story we had.
Yeah, my personal opinion is if the food that they give me is probably safe, I'm going to eat it and not make comments, but I'm not a picky person.
Pete, did you or anybody else been on a tour that you'd like to share a little bit about the food experience?
Well, I've had no troubles. I choose to be vegetarian, and I haven't had any troubles with that, because as you said, the meals in the lodges generally are very good. And then the organized trips, they've taken care of everybody's dietary desires. Yeah. But the only other thing I would mention is, I would often carry like an energy bar or something, and depending on the country, you may not be able to get into the country with food. They want you to throw away all the food you have with you when you come into the country, because they're worried about contamination. So you might want to, try to buy some food when you get there at the airport. If that's the case, if you're worried about it, buy some energy bars at the airport or something like that.
And again, Pete brought up a good thing about, again, the information, the pre-planning information should be very clear on dietary things. If there's a check mark that says I'm a vegetarian, great. If it doesn't have that listed there, you should ask and get that clarified ahead of time, so that, again, you aren't surprised. And like Pete was saying, the organization of these, they know people have different things. They have a limited amount of flexibility that they have, and they should spell that out ahead of time. And so you know what you're getting in for. Okay. And then, of course, now, I mean, you bring up the COVID stuff is still with us. We haven't gone anywhere recently. We're heading out to Hog Island in the summer. Their current stated policies are masks if you're inside. They don't care what the government guidelines are. This is what we're doing for our tour or our camp, and if you want to come, you will do these things, and so you sign up for whatever it is. So again, that could be very varied, and I don't know what they all are. I haven't looked into them yet, but that's another consideration that now that things are starting to open back up and people are actually doing them again, you should be aware of.